After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Iberian Peninsula, like most of Europe, was dominated by Germanic tribes like the Goths and the Vandals. But in the year 711, Muslim armies from North Africa conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula, bringing it into the largest empire in the world at that time, the Islamic Empire, which stretched from Spain all the way to the borders of India. Its capital was established at the city of Cordoba, which became the largest city in Western Europe and the most important center of learning, where Islamic, Jewish, and Christian scholars worked in philosophy and the sciences. It was a true golden age. The next 700 years would see a long, slow conflict in which the Christian forces from the north would eventually push the Muslims all the way to the south. In the year 1236, Ferdinand of Castile captured the city of Cordoba. And that's where we're headed. If you're traveling outside Madrid, you'll probably be leaving from Puerta de Atocha station.
Your transportation hub, which connects from here to the metro and also the regional trains. And just so you don't get overwhelmed, you'll have this nice little space inside the train station. I definitely recommend the gardens to you because the gate area for the trains has very little seating and it gets extremely crowded. So it's much nicer to come hang out here until you're ready to get on your train.
These trains are all quite fast, but the AVE trains are the high-speed ones.
The Avants are the regular trains, but in many cases the distances are so short it really doesn't matter. I'm stopping off in Cordoba on the way to Sevilla because as great a city as it was, there aren't that many monuments left to see, so it doesn't require staying overnight in a hotel. Now, if you're just stopping in to make a half-day visit, piece of advice, the train station here does not have any baggage storage. So, instead of having to carry your suitcases with you everywhere, right across the street is the bus station, where they do have storage lockers and you can store your bags there and not have to carry them around.
This picture from the visitor center shows what the city would have looked like in 1000 AD when it was a capital, with the mosque sitting there in the center and the city wall all around.
Parts of the old city wall still remain, and you can follow them to sort of get an idea of where the city ran. Of course, a little bit different now. We're here by the Mezquita, which means mosque. Actually, the Arabic word is mesjid, so it's about as close as the English is. Cordoba was the capital of Muslim Spain, which eventually became a separate caliphate. And this city was at one time the largest city in Western Europe by far, and the rival of Baghdad as the great center of learning and scholarship and translation. It was from here, really, that the sciences and the writings of the ancient Greeks and Romans passed into Europe through Arabic. In the 1200s, Cordoba fell to the Christians, and this mosque had its first chapel added inside. but it was really with Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, in the 1500s that the large cathedral that now stands was built onto this spot. So while this was once the central mosque of Muslim Spain, it is now a fully functioning Catholic cathedral where Mass is said every day. This is the outer courtyard of the mosque, the Court of La Naranjas, and that's because, of course, these are orange trees growing here. And of course, this has been restored somewhat. But the idea, we have a fountain in the center, and it's feeding this irrigation system, which irrigates the trees.
These arches may well be the most famous sight in all of Spain. There's been a lot of speculation about what they represent. Some think they are meant to look like the palm trees of Arabia. Others think that the repetition represents the cycle of life and God's continuous renewing power. But in a more general sense, they're typical of Islamic art, which stresses simplicity and geometric shapes and does not allow representation of human or animal forms. So it's a real contrast with what lies in the middle of these arches, a large Catholic cathedral that was built in the middle of the mosque and definitely is full of images of human and superhuman forms. Although Charles wanted the mosque completely destroyed, the local population didn't want to do that. They kept at least some of the mosque around the new cathedral that was built. And the contrast really highlights the difference in the art and architecture styles of Christianity and Islam. A more recent reconciliation of these two heritages is this plaque from Pope John Paul, recognizing this as a spot where for centuries people have worshipped one God.
Here you can visit what remains of Alcázar, or of course the Qasr, the fortress, which is right next to the mosque. And here he is. This is a monument to Averroes, as he's called. His name was Ibn Rushd, but like many of the Islamic Arabic scholars here, he was given a Latin name. But his Arabic name is remembered as well. He was one of the great thinkers of Cordoba, of which there were many. And this was the place they all came to. He defended rationalism. He defended the compatibility of philosophy, classical Greek philosophy, with Islam. Even modern Cordoba keeps up the tradition of having these lovely public gardens. This one's right in the middle of two busy streets in the downtown. And you can see local fruit.
By the 1300s, only one Muslim principality remained on the peninsula, and that was the Emirate of Granada in the south. But rather than fall easily, the emirs of Granada built a strong state and a very advanced economic and cultural power that for well over a century enjoyed fairly good relations with the rest of the peninsula. For most of this time there was more exchange than there was fighting. I mean, at this time, the Spanish language didn't even exist, and none of the kings and queens of the territories on the peninsula would have had any idea what a Spain was. What we think of as Spanish culture today was really a mix of the Germanic tribes and the Muslim culture that was already there. About 10% of the words in the Spanish language today, for example, come from Arabic. Words like el for the and usted. And Spanish art and architecture styles have clear Arabic influence. Even the music. The oud of Muslim culture was the direct predecessor of the guitar. This would change in the late 1400s with the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, which joined the two most powerful kingdoms, Castile and Aragon. They were officially known as the Catholic monarchs, and they made a final push to drive out the enemies of Catholicism from Spain. In 1492, Granada fell and became their new capital. In the very same room where they accepted the surrender of the Emirate of Granada, they commissioned Christopher Columbus to begin to take their crusade overseas. And so to see where this great transition took place, we're headed off to Granada. Although the train system is great in Spain, these long-distance buses are also a convenient and comfortable way to travel and can be a lot cheaper.
Sevilla fell in the 1200s, and Granada might have been next if it were not for the Emir, or Prince, Muhammad I. Now, he's better known by his nickname Ibn al-Ahmar, which means son of the red. And that's why his castle is named after him, Alhambra, meaning the red in Arabic, and this got corrupted to the Alhambra. Ibn al-Ahmar and his descendants not only established a new dynasty, but they really inaugurated another mini golden age. If the golden age at Cordoba was the big one for Iberia, it lasted for a century. Some of the best scholars in the world, like Ibn Khaldun, who is known as the father of the modern study of history, he worked here. Ibn Battuta, the great traveler, came here and actually participated in military campaigns against some of the Christian armies. It's said that Granada is all uphill. Well, that's what makes it such a great place to build a fortress. Okay, now that was an exhausting climb, but put on some heavy armor, carry a sword and a shield, have people rolling rocks at you all the way up there and shooting arrows, and you can imagine how ready you'd be for a fight when you got here and met a bunch of fully armed guys. This is one of the key elements of the defense right here. This stream that begins with the snow-covered mountains behind us and ends up as the river down the hill. Water. So even if this fortress could be surrounded, it had its own supply of fresh water, and that was key to survival. Here we go, La Alhambra, or the Red.
The Alhambra is the one place in Spain that you absolutely need to book a ticket in advance, preferably before you even come to the country. It's the most popular tourist site in Spain and gets 8,000 visitors per day. Now you can book your ticket online months before you actually travel, and it's highly recommended that you do that.
The dynasty that Ibn al-Ahmar established became known as the Nasrids in English because his patronym was al-Nasr, so Nasari in Arabic it would have been. And so you see signs around here for the Nasrid Palaces, that is the Arabic palaces, and that's of course the most famous and most highly decorated part of the complex. Now his dynasty lasted until 1492, of course, when King Abu Abdullah handed over the place to Ferdinand and Isabella. Now his name became so corrupted when it was passed into Castilian that he's known as Boabdil. but that is a really wild corruption of Abu Abdullah. When Abu Abdullah handed over control, he cried, and his mother said to him, "You weep like a woman for what you could not defend like a man." Ooh, that's harsh, Mom.
You can visit the outer parts of the palace at any time with your ticket, but the old Arabic section of the palace, the Nasrid Palace, you can only visit at the specific time specified on your ticket.
They're very serious about the admissions as well. They will check your passport or whatever ID form you use to get the ticket and make sure that the passport number matches the passport number on your ticket. If it doesn't, if you don't have your passport with you, you can't get in. The people in front of me in line, that's what happens to them. They were not allowed in. And they check it 3 times before you actually get into the Nasrid Palaces. So they're pretty serious about this.
At the center of the Nasrid Palace is the famous Lion Fountain. Around this is built a complex of pavilions, arcades, and chambers with a continuous defensive wall surrounding them all. The fountain is the original, going back to the 14th century, and the running water was one of the most impressive parts of the palace. Now, it was an engineering marvel for the time, and of course it was driven by the water pressure of the water coming down from the mountains above, but it carried water to all parts of the palace. Now, when the Christians took over this area, they took apart the Lion Fountain trying to figure out how it worked. Well, like Humpty Dumpty, they were not able to put it back together, so the fountain stood inoperative for centuries. Throughout the palace is inscribed the motto of the Nasrid dynasty, La Ghalab illa Allah, which means there is no victor except God, confirming the idea that while other kingdoms had fallen, as long as this one stayed true to God, then it would remain. And ultimate victory was not in the hands of the Christians or the Nasrid forces, but God himself. It was here that Boabdil signed the surrender to Ferdinand and Isabella, and in the very same room, Isabella commissioned Christopher Columbus to launch an expedition to what they thought was going to be Asia.
The Alhambra gained renewed interest and fame when the humorist Washington Irving published his Tales of the Alhambra in the early 1800s. Now, of course, Irving was a humorist. He wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but also, interestingly, he wrote a biography of Christopher Columbus, which was partially a farce. And one part of it has him meeting with a group of clergy who want him to prove that the world is flat. Now, of course, in the 1400s, nobody thought the world was flat. I mean, at least since the 5th century BC, everyone has known it was round. And so he included this as something ridiculous, but it became embedded in folklore. So even today, people think that Columbus proved the world was round.
So what was Columbus's big deal? Well, he thought the circumference of the world was actually much smaller than it is, and he thought it was possible for a ship to make it all the way from Europe to Asia before everybody died of starvation and thirst. And this was his big gamble. And Ferdinand and Isabella wanted to continue their crusade onto new lands, and so they banked on him.
This is the palace of Charles V, the Holy Roman Empire, and also the King of Spain. As we mentioned, the most powerful guy in Europe at the time. In the 1500s, he built this palace right in the middle of the Alhambra, just to let everybody know who was boss. It's very much in the Roman-Italian style, and now it's a museum. Ancient Rome, but again, he was the Holy Roman Empire, And the idea was that they were reviving or preserving the classical Roman Empire. The Generalife was the official fruit and vegetable gardens for the Alhambra, and this food was used to feed the some 2,000 people who lived there. Now, of course, most of this landscaping is modern, but we still get a sense of what a large and important garden area this was. How did they get them to look so neat? Well, this shows you. Throughout the entire Alhambra complex, you hear the sound of gently running water everywhere you go. Now, this, of course, was thematic. In Islam, the idea of heaven was a place of green gardens and running water, which, if you were people coming from the desert, that would be your idea of paradise.
This was the emir's retreat, a place he could go to rest and relax and look across the way at the palace where all the intrigues and business was going on. In the center of Granada, along the Street of the Catholic Monarchs, sits the monument commemorating Isabella's commissioning of Christopher Columbus to go to the New World. Back home, Ferdinand and Isabella had launched the Spanish Inquisition to try and root out heresy where they found it, as commemorated in this museum. The place also has flamenco dancing, so you get a nice mix. Although the Inquisition went on for over 300 years, as you can see here, it was during the time of Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, as they were officially designated, that the greatest number of people were tried. Ferdinand and Isabella's biggest problem was money. Their constant wars had left them bankrupt, and the Inquisition was a great way of making up for this. The primary targets of the Inquisition were the Jews, who not only controlled a lot of businesses, but especially controlled the banking industry. If you were found guilty, the Inquisition took all your money and property, while nearly 200,000 were able to buy their way out through sentences of penitence.
In 1492, when Granada capitulated to Isabella and Ferdinand, 3 months later, they issued the famous Alhambra decree. And this said that all Jews in the kingdoms had to convert within 6 months or else leave. Now, a lot of them did convert, but a lot of them did leave as well. And actually, 1492 we know is the year of Columbus's voyage. He had to delay his voyage by 6 months because the harbors were so full of ships taking Jews out of Spain. And where were they going? Primarily to Morocco and Turkey. The Alhambra decree, of course, stands as one of those shameful moments of Spain's past, but it was not actually repealed until 1968. You heard that correctly, by Francisco Franco, of all people.
Spain today is, of course, one of the most tolerant and democratic countries in the world, and museums like this help to deal with some of the difficult aspects of its past. Plaza Nueva has the tourist information office, as well as a bustling street market at times, and even old churches where you can see traditional church processions like this. But it's just one short alleyway up to the old Moorish Albazine quarter. You can find a traditional Arab hammam offering modern spa treatments, or follow the Ruta Turistica to some old Arabic sites. All this next to grand boulevards in the style of Madrid. Granada's great cathedral was built on the spot of the former mosque to commemorate the victory. As this was the capital, it was designed with space to hold the tombs of current and future kings. That's what the spaces on the second level, beneath the giant portraits, was intended for. But shortly after that, Philip II moved his capital to Madrid, and so those spaces now are filled with smaller portraits of the kings. When this cathedral was built, Spain was leading the fight against the Protestant Reformation, and that's why the cathedral proudly celebrates the Virgin Mary everywhere. This is St. James, the Moor Slayer, and under the hoofs of that horse is one of the Moors he's slaying. The most famous part of the cathedral is the Royal Chapel next door. We're not allowed to take pictures in here, but it's where the actual tombs of Ferdinand and Isabella are located.
Now this area looks like it could be in Paris. But this is still in Granada.
And here we have Spanish tacos with pork and mango.
For dessert, we have tres chocolates, 3 kinds of chocolate here in this cake.
And now off to our hotel, the lovely Cirque Hotel, Palacio de Gamboa, located in the Old Town. From Granada, it's off to see more of Spain.